Instead of 100, 200 shall be at thy disposal when the spring comes, but the king himself must first approve the undertaking." When Aristagoras heard this, he was greatly rejoiced, and went home in good heart to Miletus. And Artaphernes, after he had sent a messenger to Susa to lay the plans of Aristagoras before the king, and received his approval of the undertaking, made ready a fleet of 200 triremes, and a vast army of Persians and their confederates. The command of these he gave to a Persian named Megabates, who belonged to the house of the Achaemenids, being nephew both to himself and to King Darius. It was to a daughter of this man that Pausanias the Lacedaemonian, the son of Cleombrotus, if at least there be any truth in the tale, was affianced many years afterwards, when he conceived the desire of becoming tyrant of Greece. Artaphernes, now having named Megabates to the command, sent forward the armament to Aristagoras. Megabates set sail, and touching at Miletus, took on board Aristagoras with the Ionian troops and the Naxians, after which he steered, as he gave out, for the Hellespont. And when he reached Chios, he brought the fleet to anchor off Caucasa, being minded to wait there for a north wind, and then sail straight to Naxos. The Naxians, however, were not to perish at this time, and so the following events were brought about. As Megabates went his rounds to visit the watches on board the ships, he found a Myndian vessel upon which there was none set. Full of anger at such carelessness, he bade his guards to seek out the captain, one Scylax by name, and thrusting him through one of the holes in the ship's side, to fasten him there in such a way that his head might show outside the vessel, while his body remained within. When Scylax was thus fastened, one went and informed Aristagoras that Megabates had bound his Myndian friend, and was entreating him shamefully. So he came and asked Megabates to let the man off, but the Persian refused him, whereupon Aristagoras went himself and set Scylax free. When Megabates heard this, he was still more angry than before, and spoke hotly to Aristagoras. Then the latter said to him, "What hast thou to do with these matters? Wert thou not sent here by Artaphernes to obey me, and to sail whithersoever I ordered? Why dost meddle so?" Thus spake Aristagoras. The other, in high dudgeon at such language, waited till the night, and then dispatched a boat to Naxos to warn the Naxians of the coming danger. Now the Naxians up to this time had not had any suspicion that the armament was directed against them. As soon, therefore, as the message reached them, forthwith they brought within their walls all that they had in the open field, and made themselves ready against a siege by provisioning their town both with food and drink. Thus was Naxos placed in a posture of defence, and the Persians, when they crossed the sea from Chios, found the Naxians fully prepared for them. However, they sat down before the place and besieged it for 4 whole months. When at length all the stores which they had brought with them were exhausted, and Aristagoras had likewise spent upon the siege no small sum from his private means, and more was still needed to ensure success, the Persians gave up the attempt, and first building certain forts, wherein they left the banished Naxians, withdrew to the mainland, having utterly failed in their undertaking. And now Aristagoras found himself quite unable to make good his promises to Artaphernes. Nay, he was even hard-pressed to meet the claims whereto he was liable for the pay of the troops, and at the same time his fear was great, lest, owing to the failure of the expedition and his own quarrel with Megabates, he should be ousted from the government of Miletus. These manifold alarms had already caused him to contemplate raising a rebellion, when the man with the marked head came from Susa, bringing him instructions on the part of Istieios to revolt from the king. For Istieios, when he was anxious to give Aristagoras orders to revolt, could find but one safe way, as the roads were guarded, of making his wishes known, which was, by taking the trustiest of his slaves, shaving all the hair from off his head, and then pricking letters upon the skin and waiting till the hair grew again. Thus accordingly he did, and as soon as ever the hair was grown, he dispatched the man to Miletus, giving him no other message than this: "When thou art come to Miletus, bid Aristagoras shave thy head, and look thereon." Now the marks on the head, as I've already mentioned, were a command to revolt. All this Istieios did because it irked him greatly to be kept at Susa, and because he had strong hopes that if troubles broke out he would be sent down to the coast to quell them, whereas if Miletus made no movement he didn't see a chance of his ever again returning thither. Such then were the views which led Istieios to dispatch his messenger, and it so chanced that all these several motives to revolt were brought to bear upon Aristagoras at one and the same time. Accordingly, at this juncture Aristagoras held a council of his trusty friends, and laid the business before them, telling them both what he had himself purposed, and what message had been sent him by Istieios. At this council all his friends were of the same way of thinking, and recommended revolt, except only Herodotus the historian. He, first of all, advised them by all means to avoid engaging in war with the king of the Persians, whose might he set forth, and whose subject nations he enumerated. As, however, he couldn't induce them to listen to this counsel, he next advised them that they should do all that lay in their power to make themselves masters of the sea. There was one only way, he said, so far as he could see, of their succeeding in this. Miletus was, he knew, a weak state, but if the treasures in the temple of the Branchidae, which Croesus the Lydian gave to it, were seized, he had strong hopes that the mastery of the sea might be thereby gained. At least it would give them money to begin the war, and would save the treasures from falling into the hands of the enemy. Now these treasures were of very great value, as I showed in the first part of my history. The assembly, however, rejected the counsel of Herodotus, while nevertheless they resolved upon a revolt. One of their number, it was agreed, should sail to Myus, where the fleet had been lying since it returned from Naxos, and endeavour to seize the captains who had gone there with the vessels. Iestieios accordingly was dispatched on this errand, and he took with guile Oleatus, the son of Benolis, the Milesian, and Istieios, the son of Timnes, the Temerian, Coes, likewise the son of Erxander, to whom Darius gave Mytilene, and Aristagoras, the son of Heraclides the Chemaean, and also many others. Thus Aristagoras revolted openly from Darius, and now he set to work to scheme against him in every possible way. First of all, in order to induce the Milesians to join heartily in the revolt, he gave out that he laid down his own lordship over Miletus, and in lieu thereof established a commonwealth. After which, throughout all Ionia he did the like. For from some of the cities he drove out their tyrants, and to others, whose goodwill he hoped thereby to gain, he handed theirs over, thus giving up all the men whom he had seized at the Naxian fleet, each to the city whereto he belonged. Now the Mytileneans had no sooner got Coes into their power than they led him forth from the city and stoned him. The Chemaeans, on the other hand, allowed their tyrant to go free, as likewise did most of the others, and so this form of government ceased throughout all the cities. Aristagoras the Milesian, after he had in this way put down the tyrants and bidden the cities choose themselves captains in their room, sailed away himself on board a trireme to Lacedaemon, for he had great need of obtaining the aid of some powerful ally. At Sparta, Anaxandridas, the son of Leo, was no longer king. He had died, and his son Cleomenes had mounted the throne, not, however, by right of merit, but of birth. Anaxandridas took to wife his own sister's daughter, and was tenderly attached to her, but no children came from the marriage. Hereupon the Ephors called him before them, and said, "If thou hast no care for thine own self, nevertheless we cannot allow this, nor suffer the race of Eristhenes to die out from among us. Come then, as thy present wife bears thee no children, put her away, and wed another. So wilt thou do what is well pleasing to the Spartans." Anaxandridas, however, refused to do as they required, and said it was no good advice the Ephors gave to bid him put away his wife when she had done no wrong, and take to himself another. He therefore declined to obey them. Then the Ephors and elders took counsel together, and laid this proposal before the king. "Since thou art so fond, as we see thee to be, of thy present wife, Do what we now advise, and gainsay us not, lest the Spartans make some unwonted decree concerning thee. We ask thee not now to put away thy wife to whom thou art married. Give her still the same love and honour as ever, but take thee another wife beside, who may bear thee children. When he heard this offer, Anaxandridas gave way, and henceforth he lived with 2 wives in 2 separate houses, quite against all Spartan custom. In a short time the wife whom he had last married bore him a son, who received the name of Cleomenes, and so the heir to the throne was brought into the world by her. After this, the first wife also, who in time past had been barren, by some strange chance conceived, and came to be with child. Then the friends of the second wife, when they heard a rumour of the truth, made a great stir, and said it was a false boast, and she meant, they were sure, to bring forward as her own a supposititious child. So they raised an outcry against her, and therefore when her full time was come, the ephors, who were themselves incredulous, sat round her bed, and kept a strict watch on the labour. At this time then she bore Dorian, and after him quickly Leonidas, and after him again quickly Cleombrotus. Some even say that Leonidas and Cleombrotus were twins. On the other hand, the second wife, the mother of Cleomenes, who was a daughter of Prinatadas, the son of Demarminus, never gave birth to a second child. Now Cleomenes, it said, was not right in his mind. Indeed, he verged on madness, while Dorian surpassed all his co-mates and looked confidently to receiving the kingdom on the score of merit. When, therefore, after the death of Anaxandridas, the Spartans kept to the law, and made Cleomenes, his eldest son, king in his room, Dorian, who had imagined that he should be chosen, and who couldn't bear the thought of having such a man as Cleomenes to rule over him, asked the Spartans to give him a body of men, and left Sparta with them in order to found a colony. However, he neither took counsel of the oracle at Delphi as to the place whereto he should go, nor observed any of the customary usages, but left Sparta in dudgeon, and sailed away to Libya under the guidance of certain men who were Thracians. These men brought him to Cynips, where he colonized a spot which hasn't its equal in all Libya, on the banks of a river. But from this place he was driven in the 3rd year by the Macedonians, the Libyans, and the Carthaginians. Dorian returned to the Peloponnese, whereupon Antichares, the Ionian, gave him a counsel which he got from the oracles of Laius, to found the city of Heraclea in Sicily. The whole country of Eryx belonged, he said, to the Heracleids, since Heracles himself conquered it. On receiving this advice, Dorian went to Delphi to inquire of the oracle whether he should take the place to which he was about to go. The Pythonius prophesied that he would, whereupon Dorian went back to Libya, took up the men who had sailed with him at the first, and proceeded on his way along the shores of Italy. Just at this time, the Sybarites say they and their king Tellus were about to make war upon Crotona, and the Crotonites, greatly alarmed, besought Dorian to lend them aid. Dorian was prevailed upon, bore part in the war against Sybaris, and had a share in taking the town. Such is the account which the Sybarites give of what was done by Dorian and his companions. The Crotonites, on the other hand, maintain that no foreigner lent them aid in their war against the Sybarites, save and except Callias the Elean, a soothsayer of the race of the Iamidai, and he only forsook Tellus, the Sybaritic king, and deserted to their side when he found on sacrificing that the victims were not favourable to an attack on Crotona. Such is the account which each party gives of these matters. Both parties likewise adduce testimonies to the truth of what they say. The Sybarites show a temple and sacred precinct near the dry stream of the Crastis, which they declare that Dorian, after taking their city, dedicated to Athena Crastias. And further, they bring forward the death of Dorian as the surest proof, since he fell, they say, because he disobeyed the oracle. for had he in nothing varied from the directions given him, but confined himself to the business on which he was sent, he would assuredly have conquered the Erysian territory and kept possession of it, instead of perishing with all his followers. The Crotoniats, on the other hand, point to the numerous allotments within their borders which were assigned to Callias the Elean by their countrymen, and which, to my day, remained in the possession of his family, while Dorian and his descendants, they remark, possess nothing. Yet if Dorian had really helped them in the Sybaritic War, he would have received very much more than Callias. Such are the testimonies which are adduced on either side. It's open to every man to adopt whichever view he deems the best. Certain Spartans accompanied Dorian on his voyage as co-founders, to wit Thessalus, Peribates, Callias, and Eurylion. These men and all the troops under their command reached Sicily, but there they fell in a battle wherein they were defeated by the Egestians and Phoenicians, only one, Eurylion, surviving the disaster. He then, collecting the remnants of the beaten army, made himself master of Minoa, the Seleucian colony, and helped the Seleucians to throw off the yoke of their tyrant Pythagoras. Having upset Pythagoras, he sought to become tyrant in his room, and even reigned at Selinus for a brief space. But after a while the Seleucians rose up in revolt against him, and though he fled to the altar of Zeus Agorius, they notwithstanding put him to death. Another man who accompanied Dorian and died with him was Philip, the son of Butacidas, a man of Crotona, who, after he had been betrothed to a daughter of Telis the Sybarite, was banished from Crotona, whereupon his marriage came to naught, and he in his disappointment took ship and sailed to Cyrene. From thence he became a follower of Dorian, furnishing to the fleet a trireme of his own, a crew of which he supported at his own charge. This Philip was an Olympian victor, and the handsomest Greek of his day. His beauty gained him honours at the hands of the Egestians, which they never accorded to anyone else, for they raised a hero temple over his grave, and they still worship him with sacrifices. Such then was the end of Dorian, who, if he had brooked the rule of Cleomenes and remained in Sparta, would have been king of Lacedaemon, since Cleomenes, after reigning no great length of time, died without male offspring, leaving behind him an only daughter, by name Gorgo. Cleomenes, however, was still king when Aristagoras, tyrant of Miletus, reached Sparta. At their interview, Aristagoras, according to the report of the Lacedaemonians, produced a bronze tablet, whereupon the whole circuit of the earth was engraved, with all its seas and rivers. Discourse began between the two, and Aristagoras addressed the Spartan king in these words following: "Think it not strange, O King Cleomenes, that I have been at the pains to sail hither, for the posture of affairs, which I will now recount unto thee, made it fitting. Shame and grief is it indeed to none so much as to us, that the sons of the Ionians should have lost their freedom, and come to be the slaves of others. But yet it touches you likewise, O Spartans, beyond the rest of the Greeks, inasmuch as the preeminence over all Greece appertains to you. We beseech you, therefore, by the common gods of the Grecians, deliver the Ionians, who are your own kinsmen, from slavery. Truly the task isn't difficult, for the barbarians are an unwarlike people, and you are the best and bravest warriors in the whole world. Their mode of fighting is the following. They use bows and arrows and a short spear. They wear trousers in the field and cover their heads with turbans. So easy are they to vanquish. Know, too, that the dwellers in these parts have more good things than all the rest of the world put together, gold and silver and brass and embroidered garments, beasts of burthen and bond-servants, all which, if you only wish it, you may soon have for your own. The nations border on one another, in the order which I will now explain. Next to these Ionians," here he pointed with his finger to the map of the world, which was engraved upon the tablet which he had brought with him, "these Lydians dwell. Their soil is fertile, and few people are so rich in silver. Next to them, he continued, come these Phrygians, who have more flocks and herds than any race that I know, and more plentiful harvests. On them border the Cappadocians, whom we Greeks know by the name of Syrians. They are neighbours to the Cilicians, who extend all the way to this sea, where Cyprus, the island which you see here, lies. The Cilicians pay the king a yearly tribute of 500 talents. Next to them come the Armenians, who live here. They too have numerous flocks and herds. After them come the Mattiani, inhabiting this country. Then Kysia, this province, where you see the river Coaspes marked, and likewise the town Susa upon its banks, where the great king holds his court, and where the treasuries are in which his wealth is stored. Once masters of this city, you may be bold to vie with Zeus himself for riches. In the wars which ye wage with your rivals of Messenia, with them of Argos, likewise, and of Arcadia, about paltry boundaries and strips of land not so remarkably good, ye contend with those who have no gold, nor silver even, which often give men heart to fight and die. Must ye wage such wars? And when ye might so easily be lords of Asia, will ye decide otherwise? Thus spoke Aristagoras, and Cleomenes replied to him, Milesian, stranger, 3 days hence I will give thee an answer. And so they proceeded no further at that time. When, however, the day appointed for the answer came, and the two once more met, Cleomenes asked Aristagoras how many days' journey it was from the sea of the Ionians to the king's residence. Hereupon Aristagoras, who had managed the rest so cleverly, and succeeded in deceiving the king, tripped in his speech and blundered, for instead of conceding the truth, as he ought to have done if he wanted to induce the Spartans to cross into Asia, he said plainly that it was a journey of 3 months. Cleomenes caught at the words, and preventing Aristagoras from finishing what he had begun to say concerning the road, addressed him thus, Milesian stranger, quit Sparta before sunset. This is no good proposal that thou makest to the Lacedaemonians, to conduct them a distance of 3 months' journey from the sea. When he had thus spoken, Cleomenes went to his home. But Aristagoras took an olive bough in his hand, and hastened to the king's house, where he was admitted by reason of his suppliant's guise. Gorgo, the daughter of Cleomenes, and his only child, a girl of about 8 or 9 years of age, happened to be there, standing by her father's side. Aristagoras, seeing her, requested Cleomenes to send her out of the room before he began to speak with him. But Cleomenes told him to stay on, and not mind the child. So Aristagoras began with a promise of 10 talents if the king would grant him his request, and when Cleomenes shook his head, continued to raise his offer till it reached 50 talents. Whereupon the child spoke. Father, she said, get up and go, or the stranger will certainly corrupt thee. Then Cleomenes, pleased at the warning of his child, withdrew and went into another room. Aristagoras quitted Sparta for good, not being able to discourse any more concerning the road which led up to the king. Now the true account of the road in question is the following. Royal stations exist along its whole length, and excellent caravansaries, and throughout it traverses an inhabited tract and is free from danger. In Lydia and Phrygia there are 20 stations within a distance of 94.5 parasangs. On leaving Phrygia, the Halys has to be crossed, and here are gates, through which you must needs pass ere you can traverse the stream. A strong force guards this post. When you've made the passage and are come into Cappadocia, 28 stations and 104 parasangs bring you to the borders of Cilicia, where the road passes through 2 sets of gates, at each of which there is a guard posted. Leaving these behind, you go on through Cilicia, where you find 3 stations in a distance of 15.5 parasangs. The boundary between Cilicia and Armenia is the river Euphrates, which is necessary to cross in boats. In Armenia, the resting places are 15 in number, and the distance is 56.5 parasangs. There's one place where a guard is posted. 4 large streams intersect this district, all of which have to be crossed by means of boats. The first of these is the Tigris. The second and the third have both of them the same name, though they're not only different rivers, but don't even run from the same place. For the one which I've called the first of the two has its source in Armenia, while the other flows afterwards out of the country of the Mantineans. The fourth of the streams is called the Gindes, and this is the river which Cyrus dispersed by digging for it 360 channels. Leaving Armenia and entering the Mantinean country, you have 4 stations. These passed, you find yourself in Kisia, where 11 stations and 42.5 parasangs bring you to another navigable stream, the Coaspes, on the banks of which the city of Susa is built. Thus the entire number of the stations is raised to 111, and so many are in fact the resting places that one finds between Sardis and Susa. If then the royal road be measured aright, and the parasang equals as it does 30 furlongs, the whole distance from Sardis to the palace of Memnon, as it's called, amounting thus to 450 parasangs, would be 13,500 furlongs. Travelling then at the rate of 150 furlongs a day, one will take exactly 90 days to perform the journey. Thus, when Aristagoras the Milesian told Cleomenes the Lacedaemonian that it was a 3 months' journey from the sea up to the king, he said no more than the truth. The exact distance, if anyone desires still greater accuracy, is somewhat more, for the journey from Ephesus to Sardis must be added to the foregoing account, and this will make the whole distance between the Greek Sea and Susa, or the city of Memnon as it's called, 14,040 furlongs, since Ephesus is distant from Sardis 540 furlongs. This would add 3 days to the 3 months' journey. When Aristagoras left Sparta, he hastened to Athens, which had got quit of its tyrants in the way that I'll now describe. After the death of Hipparchus, the son of Pisistratus and brother of the tyrant Hippias, who, in spite of the clear warning he had received concerning his fate in a dream, was slain by Harmodius and Aristogeiton, men both of the race of the Gephyrians, the oppression of the Athenians continued by the space of 4 years, and they gained nothing but were worse used than before. Now the dream of Hipparchus was the following. The night before the Panathenaic festival, he thought he saw in his sleep a tall and beautiful man, who stood over him and read him the following riddle. Bear thou unbearable woes with the all-bearing heart of a lion, never be sure shall wrongdoer escape the reward of wrongdoing. As soon as day dawned, he sent and submitted his dream to the interpreters, after which he offered the averting sacrifices, and then went and led the procession in which he perished. The family of the Gephyrians, to which the murderers of Hipparchus belonged, according to their own account, came originally from Eretria. My inquiries, however, have made it clear to me that they were in reality Phoenicians, descendants of those who came with Cadmus into the country now called Boeotia. Here they received for their portion the district of Tanagra, in which they afterwards dwelt. On their expulsion from this country by the Boeotians, which happened some time after that of the Cadmeans, from the same parts by the Argives, they took refuge at Athens. The Athenians received them among their citizens upon set terms, whereby they were excluded from a number of privileges which aren't worth mentioning. Now the Phoenicians who came with Cadmus, and to whom the Gephyrii belonged, introduced into Greece upon their arrival a great variety of arts, among the rest that of writing, whereof the Greeks till then had, as I think, been ignorant. And originally they shaped their letters exactly like all the other Phoenicians, but afterwards, in course of time, they changed by degrees their language, and together with it the form likewise of their characters. Now the Greeks who dwelt about those parts at that time were chiefly the Ionians. The Phoenician letters were accordingly adopted by them, but with some variation in the shape of a few, and so they arrived at the present use, still calling the letters